Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Brought to you by Junk Be Gone and the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source. Happy to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. We've got SEC Media Days this week, so football season is here, which is amazing. It seems like yesterday that Jeremy Pruitt was being run out of town. Football season's here, so we're going to talk a ton of football in this show. Also, I want to say thanks to all of you that watched last week. Apologize that occasionally if a billionaire launches himself into subspace for 5 minutes, that's national news, and all the networks cut in and cover it. So I watched our ratings, and they were here, and there was a cut in, one here, and then as soon as the cut in was over, everybody was like, is that over yet? Cool, let's go back to the Sports Source. That's not typical for our industry. Usually if you lose somebody, they're gone. So the fact that the number went back up speaks to your loyalty to this program and our sponsors, and I just wanted to say thanks off the top. And I checked today, no Jeff Bezos, no Elon Musk going into space as far as I know. So we're going to have nothing but sports. Let's get into it. First segment of our program is brought to you by our friends at the Garza Law Firm. Let's face it, an attorney is not something that any of us want to need. But when you do need one, turn to Knoxville's own Marcos Garza and the Garza Law Firm. Criminal defense, DUI defense, personal injury cases, and more. Trust the Garza Law Firm right here in Knoxville, right in East Tennessee, unlike a lot of these folks that are advertising from Memphis and Birmingham, trying to convince you they're from here. They're not. Garza Law is. All right. Some other guys that are right here in East Tennessee, they try and convince you they're from elsewhere, but they're from right here. Josh Ward, WNML, AM and FM. I might as well just say that right off the top. This is one of those weird shows where it's just the 990 and 99.1 show. So we got Josh Ward right here, Jimmy Himes right there, Vince Farrar right here. We got one more guy waiting in the wings. So it's not fully WNML today, but thanks to all of you for being here. Appreciate it.
We're going to send the ratings into subspace.
That's right. You're going to launch it. That's right. Hopefully for longer than 5 minutes. SEC Media Days kicks off tomorrow in Hoover, Alabama. Fans will not be in attendance inside the building, but thank goodness it's not a Zoom thing. Josh Heupel, along with Velus Jones and Alontae Taylor, will be taking part in their activities on Tuesday. First things first, in terms of topics, my assumption is this thing's going to be name, image, likeness. Name, image, likeness. Is that the main takeaway? What do you expect to be the other hot topics this week when people finally sit down with these coaches and the players? COVID's probably still going to be out there, but what do you think the hot topics for the SEC coaches are going to be specifically?
Other than what you said, college football playoff expansion. I think going from 4 to 12, that's going to be a topic, and it'll be discussed. And it'll be interesting to see. We had North Carolina's Mack Brown on recently, and he said none of his players wanted to go to a 12-team playoff. None of them, which surprised me because I thought there'd be more access. And it's a pretty good team over there. But I think that'll be one of the hot topics other than name, image, likeness.
And I think that's going to be interesting. That's a great question for the players who come through there because I saw that same story. I actually had that mentioned here, so I'm glad you grabbed it right off the top, is the fact that you had a team that said, no, we don't want that many extra games. I think that's most of us. I'm like you. I wouldn't have anticipated that. So I wonder, is that just a North Carolina thing? My guess is it's not. So it'll be interesting to see how many SEC players say, nah, I'd kind of like it to be 6, 8 teams instead of 12. We don't need that extra game.
I bet Alabama doesn't say that.
That's right. Josh, thoughts on anything else is going to be a big topic this week?
I agree with all that. We can't forget the transfer portal. I know it's kind of old news because name, image, likeness is here, so you've set transfer portal aside. But there will be some players, including one of Tennessee's players, Velus Jones, who transferred. And he was a graduate, so it's a little bit different. But that is a big part of the present and the future of college football, so I think the transfer portal. We'll hear a lot about that.
Yeah, I think all those things and name, image, and likeness will be big because it's a way to sort of personalize it with the player, maybe try to relax them, and I think that's sort of the approach. Anytime you can get a player to talk and relax and talk about something about them, their personal life, things like that, I think is going to be used as a tactic. So I think that will be at the forefront for everyone. And honestly, for some, it's just going to be an easy go-to. Yep. Can't think of anything to ask. I'll ask about name, image, likeness. So your thoughts. So we're going to get a whole lot of that. But you guys hit on the bigger ones. And, Alabama is always a story, not only because of the geography of where we're at, but because they're always winning. And then how are they going to reload? So that'll be something everybody will be asked about as well, I think.
In terms of star of the week, you have so many in the media who love Lane Kiffin, and he's good for a quote. I mean, he's basically a troll now. He's not as sharp as Steve Spurrier used to be, but he does for Twitter what Steve Spurrier used to do with his mouth. I think Lane Kiffin's going to be one of the most watched, most covered guys this week. Anybody else that you anticipate getting a lot of eyeballs on him? Saban, obviously, but
well, I think it's been under discussed how entertaining potentially Mike Leach can be. I haven't really heard a whole lot because we've talked about obviously always Alabama, but then specifically Lane Kiffin because he's back in the Southeastern Conference as a head coach. But I think you may see Mike Leach say something, and if Mike Leach says something, then you run it back to the other coaches as well.
He might show up with a patch over his left eye.
yeah, he could do. There's no telling with Mike Leach. I mean, he could do something as silly as Pirates, or he could go down the rabbit hole and start talking vaccines and stuff with his back. I mean, this is a guy he's never.
Because COVID will be a topic this week, so sure. It'll come up with Leach. And it's the first media days for Leach, and not for Kiffin ever because he was at Tennessee, but they didn't go through it last year.
Yeah.
So the first time at their respective schools.
I think Kirby Smart's going to face some. Are you going to be the first guy to beat Saban? And then Jimbo Fisher is going to face some of those questions too.
Remember Jimbo had the comments earlier in the offseason.
Yeah, and then Saban came back with where's he going to beat me in golf? Yeah. Great answer.
Yeah. Well, with COVID, it's going to be a lot of the normalcy. What's it like to be closer to normal? So that'll be another sort of branch of some of these bigger topics.
How do you expect Josh Heupel to do? And let's say this right off the bat: how well these guys speak means nothing compared to how they do on a football field. Jeremy Pruitt was like a bump on a log. Butch Jones was just a mouthful of slogans and gibberish. Derek Dooley, entertaining, terrible coach. So what do you expect from Josh Heupel? Does he strike you as somebody that's going to connect with people, or is he just kind of seem bump on the logish?
He won't be bump on the logish. I think that bar has been set too high for Josh Heupel to get to. But I think he'll do fine. I think he's going to be come across as more engaging. But I don't know that he's going to be set off the excitement level to new heights or to the moon. But I think he'll talk about his players. I think the key for him is how does he come across? Does he come across now with his bigger stage as maybe seeing the lights and seeing the bigness, how big that stage is? But I think he'll handle himself well, and hopefully he'll be like he has been in the local media and not be afraid to be engaging and talk about players specifically and seem sincere with his answers. And if he does that, I think the rest of the media that's there for his session, I think they'll appreciate him and not rip him, maybe give him a little bit of a chance.
Thoughts on how he'll do?
Yeah, I think he'll do fine. I don't know that Tennessee will be a big story coming out of it, but Josh Heupel himself, I think most people covering media days will look at Tennessee and say, yeah, that's a Tennessee problem that Josh Heupel inherited. Right. I think Heupel's pretty well respected in the world of college football with his success at Oklahoma. He did fine at UCF, and people know what he's taking on. But considering how bad offensively Tennessee was and how good Heupel has been, I think if anybody's looking at the future, they'll say, well, Heupel has a chance to fix it. But I think he'll do fine. I think the players will talk nicely about him.
I don't think he'll be real gregarious. I don't think that's his personality. But I would be interested to see, like I remember a few years ago when, I may have this a little bit off, but Jeremy Pruitt was talking about how tough his schedule was. He said the only thing that make it tougher is they played like Grayson High School. Well, there was a player that they were recruiting out of Grayson High School. So
William Morris.
Yeah, I wonder and boy, good luck with that one. He's at Oklahoma. But I do wonder if he would throw in anything like that. I don't see him as being tremendously quotable. I think he'll do okay, but not bowl anybody over.
One story I think you'll see, because it'll be SEC Network and ESPN all over, it's the ESPN story that came out this week. I think it's ridiculous and silly, but they ranked all of the college football coaches as players, and he was the third best, behind Pat
Harbaugh
Fitzgerald and Jim Harbaugh. Yeah, so that'll be one of those throw-in lines from Dari Noka or whoever's going to be anchoring this thing. Vince, you were going to say something?
Yeah, we're talking about storylines overall for the league, and one of them obviously for Josh Heupel that he needs to be prepared for, and he will be, is the NCAA.
Yes.
He's going to get asked about that.
I think he's going to get buried with that. I think that's going to be That's gonna. I mean, think about it. If you're the regional media, you're not Knoxville media.
Yeah.
And we've talked NCAA out the wazoo, but this is your first chance to get in front of him. I think he's going to get hit with, what did you inherit? What kind of a mess did Jeremy Pruitt leave you?
Yeah.
I think somebody's going to try and get him to say something bad about his predecessor.
Yeah.
I think they're going to talk about how big is this hole that you're going to try and dig out of? How tough is it to recruit against all this? I think the NCAA is by far the most interesting topic facing it. Maybe his offense would be number 2, but that's 1, 2. And tied into that NCAA is just the transfer portal. You've lost 300 players. How do you deal with that?
Well, Tennessee set the bar in the transfer portal. I mean, outgoing, 26 to 30, depending on if you count players that were kicked off the team before that, with about 9 or 10 coming in. So yeah, nobody's been hit harder with the transfer portal than Tennessee.
Yeah, they had 35, counting the dismissals and counting walk-ons.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there were 4 that they let out who'd signed national letter of intent.
Right.
So that takes your roster down quite a bit, doesn't it? But and he'll be asked about the quarterback situation. Who's gonna be the
Yes.
quarterback?
Yeah.
And it's a battle that includes 2 transfers. So regionally, I don't know how big of a deal that is, but that'll be part of the conversation too.
All right, when we come back, it appears to me that there are some good signs regarding Josh Heupel's recruiting. We know all the clouds hanging over him. We've discussed them here a million times, but you're starting to see some good things, I think. We'll see if these guys agree. Come on back on the Sports Source. We'll discuss.